I've been convinced by other people around me that there are things that I should perhaps tell. Oh, no, not at all, really. It's more freedom, because then I can say what I really want to say and not what somebody else has deemed it wise for me to say.
Cass Elliot, the shining star of the Mamas and the Papas, captivated the world with her voice and charm. But behind her bright smile was a hidden world of pain, loneliness, struggles with her body image, and heartbreak. The applause couldn't silence her personal battles. What really happened behind the scenes of her fame? And how did it all lead to a shocking and tragic end? Her untold story will leave you speechless. Early insecurities. Ellen Naomi Cohen, who is popularly known as Mama Cass, was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1941. From a young age, she stood out, but not in the way she wanted. Ellen struggled with her weight, something that made her feel different from the other kids. She was teased at school, and the cruel comments made her believe she wasn't good enough. It wasn't just the kids who made her feel this way. Society's idea of beauty at the time was slim, delicate, and polished. Ellen didn't fit that mold, and it hurt. Her parents didn't mean to add to her pain, but they didn't always help. Her father owned a delicatessen, and food was a big part of their family life. While Ellen found comfort in food, she also saw it as part of her problem. She wanted to fit in, to be liked, but she always felt like an outsider. Ellen dreamed big, though. She loved music, and she had a voice that could silence a room. When she sang, she felt powerful, like nothing else mattered. But even when her talent was obvious, people couldn't look past her appearance. In her teenage years, she tried out for school plays and singing groups, but often got rejected. "You're good," they'd say, "but you don't have the right look." That phrase, the right look, became a heavy weight she carried everywhere. Determined to succeed, Ellen moved to New York City after high school to chase her dream. It wasn't easy. The music world was tough, and Ellen faced rejection after rejection. Auditions didn't just test her voice, they also judged her body. Every no felt like another reminder that talent wasn't enough if you didn't fit the image people expected. Ellen began to build a defense. She used humor to deflect the pain and became the life of the party. She laughed the loudest, told the funniest jokes, and made everyone around her feel at ease. But underneath the bold, cheerful personality was a girl who felt invisible. Her jokes were a mask, hiding the hurt she didn't want anyone to see. When Ellen joined the music scene, she started going by Cass, a nickname that sounded cool and memorable. Later, she added Mama to her name, partly as a joke about her size and partly as a way to own what others might use against her. Becoming Mama Cass was her way of taking control, turning something she was ashamed of into part of her identity. In the early 1960s, Cass began singing backup for artists like Jim Croce and Tim Hardin. Her voice stood out, and she finally started getting noticed. But even then, people didn't take her seriously because of how she looked. She would walk into rooms full of thin, glamorous women and feel like she didn't belong. Some people were kind, but others dismissed her entirely. Cass's big break came when she met John Phillips, Michelle Phillips, and Denny Doherty. Together, they formed the Mamas and the Papas, and suddenly, Cass had a chance to prove herself. Her voice became the heart of the group, but even as their fame grew, her insecurities stayed with her. She was the star, but she still felt like the odd one out. Years of rejection and hurt had left scars. Cass may have laughed and smiled in public, but privately she battled feelings of worthlessness. She tried everything to lose weight, crash diets, pills, anything that might make her feel better about herself. But these quick fixes only made her feel worse in the long run. Cass Elliot wasn't just a singer, she was a fighter. Every step she took in her career was a fight against the doubts, the stereotypes, and the people who told her she wasn't enough. But the battles she fought inside her own mind were the hardest of all. Despite the struggles that marked her early years, Cass's journey into stardom brought new challenges, ones she couldn't have predicted: fame and the weight of expectations. When the Mamas and the Papas hit the scene, Cass Elliot was the voice everyone remembered. Her powerful, soulful singing was impossible to ignore, and it made her stand out. But with fame came pressure, a lot of pressure. Being the group's lead vocalist meant she was always in the spotlight. While the world cheered for her voice, it was hard to escape the whispers about her appearance. Cass was known as the funny fat one in the group, a label that stuck no matter how much she accomplished. The media didn't focus on her talent, they focused on her size. The constant comments about her weight became a painful reminder of the insecurity she fought every day. For every glowing review of her voice, there was another article or headline making fun of her size. The public's obsession with her weight gnawed at her confidence, leaving her with a sense of shame. She couldn't escape it. Cass tried everything to change her body. She crash-dieted, used weight loss pills, and put herself through extreme routines to fit the image of what a pop star should look like. But no matter how much weight she lost, it never seemed to be enough. Her inner struggles grew deeper, and it felt like her self-worth was always tied to the number on a scale. Her relationship with the band wasn't perfect either. There were personal tensions that bubbled under the surface, especially with Denny Doherty, her bandmate. Cass had fallen in love with him, but Denny didn't feel the same way. This unrequited love was a secret pain she carried, and it affected everything. She would sing alongside him, but in her heart, it hurt. Her feelings were often dismissed by the band, and the emotional weight of it all became too much to bear. The band wasn't just a musical group, it was a complicated family, and like many families, there were power struggles. Everyone wanted to be heard, and egos clashed. John Phillips, the band leader, often took control, but his actions also drove the group apart. Cass felt torn between loyalty to the band and her own growing frustration with the situation. She didn't always fit in with the others, and despite her success, she was constantly battling feelings of rejection. In the midst of this, Cass turned to food, alcohol, and sometimes drugs to numb the pain. The 1960s music scene was full of excess, and drugs were often seen as a way to cope with the pressures of fame. Cass, like many others, used substances as an escape. Food became both a comfort and an enemy. Alcohol and drugs helped her forget the stress of being in the public eye. But these habits took a toll on her health. The longer she tried to manage her pain with these crutches, the harder it became to break free from them. As the band's success continued to grow, so did the cracks within the Mamas and the Papas. Behind the perfect harmonies and the catchy tunes, the personal conflicts became unbearable. The magic that had once bonded them together began to fade. John Phillips and Michelle Phillips were often at odds, and tensions between band members reached a breaking point. Cass, already struggling with her own demons, felt the weight of these conflicts even more deeply. The band eventually collapsed under the strain of creative differences and personal issues. Cass had invested everything into the Mamas and the Papas, and when it fell apart, so did she. Her world, which had once revolved around her musical family, now felt empty. She lost not only her band, but her primary source of validation. Music had been her escape, her way of dealing with everything she couldn't face, and now that was gone too. Post-breakup, Cass was left to face the world on her own. The loneliness she had been running from for years became impossible to ignore. Her confidence had been shattered, and the validation she had once gotten from her fans and the band evaporated. She found herself isolated, struggling to find new paths in her career. There were no more Mamas and the Papas to keep her going. She was alone in a way that hurt far deeper than any rejection she'd faced before. Cass didn't know how to rebuild herself. She turned inward, but all the self-doubt she'd buried for so long came rushing back. She tried to fill the void with more performances, more music, but the emptiness remained. Losing her musical family had cost her more than just a career. It cost her a sense of purpose, a piece of herself that she couldn't get back. Her downfall wasn't just about fame slipping away. It was the result of years of emotional pain and unhealed wounds, the pressure to fit an image that wasn't hers, the heartbreak of unrequited love, and the band's collapse had left her fractured. And as she fought to hold it all together, she was losing the battle within herself. solo career, and mounting challenges. After the Mamas and the Papas disbanded, Cass Elliot had high hopes for her solo career. Her voice was still powerful, and she believed she could make it on her own. But the transition wasn't easy. While her debut solo albums got some attention, they didn't capture the same magic that had made the group a household name. Despite her undeniable talent, critics and fans seemed to focus on her appearance rather than her music. Cass was now fighting a battle on two fronts: her voice, which was still beloved, but also the relentless public scrutiny about her weight. The media's constant focus on her size made her feel like she was never enough, no matter how much she succeeded. Her insecurities grew, and the pressure to fit the image of a pop star led her to adopt unhealthy weight loss methods, crash diets, and amphetamines, hoping to finally meet the expectations of the world around her. But her problems weren't just professional. Cass's finances were in trouble. She had lived a lavish lifestyle during her time with the band, and now those habits were catching up with her. She was mismanaging her money and struggling with mounting debts, which only added to her stress. On top of this, Cass had the responsibility of raising her daughter Owen as a single mother. The guilt of being away from her daughter while on tour weighed heavily on her. She felt like she wasn't doing enough for Owen, and the constant juggling between work and motherhood made her feel overwhelmed and inadequate. Cass's romantic life didn't bring the happiness she longed for either. She had a series of brief, disappointing relationships, none of which gave her the love or support she needed. She longed for a stable partner, but often ended up feeling betrayed, leaving her heartbroken each time. These failed romances only deepened her sense of loneliness and longing for connection. Her health also began to deteriorate. Cass struggled with extreme weight loss methods that left her physically exhausted. Crash diets, pills, and other unhealthy practices took a toll on her body. She started to feel worn out, both mentally and physically, but kept pushing forward, determined to keep her career alive. As her health worsened, she turned to prescription medications to cope with the stress and anxiety that plagued her daily life. What had started as a way to manage her fears soon became a crutch, making it harder for her to escape the cycle she had fallen into. Despite her ongoing challenges, Cass remained determined. Her voice still resonated with audiences, and she kept performing, but the constant weight of her personal struggles was taking a toll. The world saw her as a star, but inside she was battling a series of demons that were hard to overcome. Her solo career was meant to be a fresh start, but it turned out to be even harder than she ever imagined. After the collapse of the Mamas and the Papas, Cass was forced to find her own path, but being solo in the spotlight came with its own set of struggles and doubts. A tragic spiral. In 1974, Cass Elliot decided to make a fresh start in London, hoping the vibrant music scene would revive her career. She had always loved performing, and after years of personal turmoil, she saw this as an opportunity to reclaim her former glory. Her performances at the iconic London Palladium were a hit. Audiences were captivated by her powerful voice, and Cass felt briefly rejuvenated by their enthusiasm. For a moment, it felt like the magic of the Mamas and the Papas had returned. But behind the scenes, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Despite the success of her performances, Cass was physically and emotionally drained. The years of crash dieting, stress, and unhealthy habits were beginning to take their toll. Each performance felt like a battle, but Cass pushed herself to give her best, hiding her exhaustion behind her trademark smile. She was determined to keep up the facade of a comeback, even as the pressure to stay in the spotlight wore her down. Cass's body was no longer the same as it once was. Exhausted from constant performances, her health had begun to deteriorate. The strain of her lifestyle was undeniable, but she kept going, hoping the success would continue. But deep down, she knew she was running out of time. On the night before her death, Cass was in surprisingly good spirits. After a string of successful performances at the Palladium, she celebrated with friends. Despite her exhaustion, she was determined to enjoy the moment, laughing and joking with those around her. For a brief time, Cass seemed to return to the lively, confident woman she had been before. Those who saw her that night said she was happy, if only for a moment. But behind the laughter, there were subtle signs of exhaustion. She had been battling her demons for years, and it was clear that the emotional and physical toll was beginning to catch up with her. Her friends noticed she seemed a little more worn down than usual, but Cass wore a mask of happiness, not wanting to burden anyone with her struggles. After the celebration, she returned to her flat alone, unaware that the next morning would be her last. The following morning, Cass was found dead in her London flat at just 32 years old. The official cause of death was heart failure, attributed to the strain caused by her obesity and years of unhealthy dieting. However, the media quickly latched onto a bizarre rumor that she had choked on a ham sandwich. This unfounded story spread rapidly, overshadowing the real reason behind her death. The ham sandwich myth became a cruel punchline, reducing her tragic end to a joke. The media's obsession with her appearance and the sensationalism surrounding her death prevented the public from understanding the true struggles she had faced. Cass Elliott's death was a result of years of physical and emotional hardship, but the world instead focused on a trivial, false narrative. The myth of the ham sandwich overshadowed her legacy as a talented artist, and her struggles with mental health and body image were lost in the noise. Cass's death served as a tragic reminder of the toll that fame, societal expectations, and personal struggles can take on an individual. Instead of being remembered for her incredible voice and contributions to music, she became the subject of a cruel joke, her true legacy obscured by a tabloid myth. Her passing marked the end of a life full of talent, ambition, and untold pain, the factors behind the downfall. From the start, Cass felt pressured to meet society's unrealistic beauty standards. In the 1960s and 1970s, pop stars were supposed to be thin, young, and attractive in a traditional way. But Cass didn't follow the trend. Even though she sang well, people referred to her as the funny fat one in the Mamas and the Papas. Her self-esteem dropped a lot, and she focused so much on her looks that it overshadowed her singing talent. She resorted to strict diets and amphetamines to deal with pressure, trying to fit in with what others expect. No matter how much weight she lost, she still faced criticism, which made her feel very doubtful and upset. Like many people, Cass turned to alcohol and drugs to cope with the pressures of being famous. During the 1960s and 1970s, drug use was often seen as glamorous in the music industry. People didn't openly discuss mental health back then, especially for women in the spotlight. Cass struggled with feeling uncertain, anxious, and alone, but she didn't have the support or resources to help her. Cass had to keep smiling and participating, hiding her emotional pain in a field that valued achievement more than personal well-being. She turned to drugs to cope with her worry, and her self-destructive behavior got worse. Her struggle to break free from this downward loop was made worse by the lack of mental health support. The music industry was known for treating artists as if they were just products to be sold. This also included Cass. She felt pressured to maintain an image instead of being supported as an artist, even though she was very talented. When the Mamas and the Papas broke up, Cass felt a lot of pressure to do well on her own. However, her solo career wasn't as successful as the band had been. The business cared more about her image than her singing, without considering how this affected her personally. Cass's finances got worse, and poor handling put her deeply in debt. She was expected to keep going even though things were getting harder for her, and the abuse in the business made her feel more vulnerable and isolated. While fame brought Cass respect, it also made her feel lonely. As she progressed in her job, she felt more distant from people she once trusted. She felt alone in a crowded world because of constant public criticism, conflicts with her group, and personal problems. She longed for real love and connection, but being a star kept her apart from others. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories. Click on the next video popping up on your screen. You won't want to miss what's coming next.